Hello, welcome to the May 20th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we will get started. Bear with me just for a moment. Okay, sounds like my monitoring computer is fine. My name is Gregundo. I am the host of the live stream today. I'm based in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. area. I work as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products for Yamaha Corporation of America. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in the live chat field or simply email questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We'll try to go through all the questions chronologically as submitted. My ability to answer the questions in real time, I will try to catch up throughout the entire live stream. But if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if you could just simply, we'll try to get through them in order. But if we could try to avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. And when asking questions, if we could indicate which version of Cubase that you have, whether it's AI, LE, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or which version, such as 10, 11, 12, 10.5, and if it's also on Mac or Windows platform, that information is often helpful. And we should have all of the topics covered in today's live stream available pinned with timestamps in the comments field, pinned to the top, so you can look for that afterwards and use that as a reference. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to do that website for us. Is a wonderful resource. We have two people that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees, but they just volunteer their time to make it a better community. And we've had people posting nefarious links and stuff like that, and they do a great job. So we want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude and to Agent K. And we say Agent K is not going to be able to make most of the live stream today, so we want to give a special thanks to them, and they're part of making it such a wonderful community. Also, if you're looking for, in addition to all the official Steinberg resources, you could check out the Cubase Nation Discord, and Jazz Dude does a lot of work with that. So, and that's just kind of a compilation of different tutorials that are a real benefit to the Steinberg community. So I'm going to go ahead and break my chat out onto a separate screen here so that we can begin. Okay, so we have first question, how to delete multiple time warp at once. So I guess this would be like maybe the warp markers. All right, so let's say if we have our warp markers here, we could, so let's go ahead and I'll switch to our free warp, and let's say we'll kind of zoom in here, and let's say I want to first, well, I'll just populate it with some warp markers. So we'll go to real-time processing, and I'll just say we'll create the warp markers from hit points. So as we can add warp markers kind of one at a time. So if we wanted to add these, but to delete them, we would just kind of hold down the Alt or Option key. And let me get my computer keyboard to the right computer. And as we do that and go near the top, we hold down the Alt or Option key with the warp tool selected. We can choose to erase the warp markers, and I think that this is going to be kind of one at a time. And if you need it to get rid of all of the warp markers at once, so I don't know of a way to delete multiple markers. Generally, it's going to be kind of most of the workflow would be kind of a one-by-one basis. But if you wanted to delete, let's say if we just come over here and let's go to our audio warp, that you could choose to reset. So we could do all the resets. so that when we go to our warp markers here, I think this might get rid of them. So that would get rid of them. So you could reset kind of all the warp markers if you needed to do it, or delete them one at a time. But I don't know a way of deleting like 3 or 4 warp markers simultaneously. All right, so we have Michael Finlayson checking in from South Carolina. Glad you can make it, Michael. All right, so we have Sir Robert from Atlanta, Georgia. All right, we see Nick from the UK. All right, Nick is on time and has coffee ready, so it's good. All right, so we have KG Holly checking in from Ottawa, Canada. Jan from Stockholm, Dallas LaRue. All right, we have a question from Dallas LaRue. Can you give a brief rundown on Apache SX and how it can be used to manipulate sound? I'm trying to get ideas for bass. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come over here and I have like a synth bass sound. So our Apache SX is going to be a MIDI insert, and this is basically a really kind of fancy arpeggiator. So if I wanted to hold down, let's say, instead of let's say if I play a chord, I will, this is a monophonic patch, but if I play a chord, we would just have a standard chord. But now when I play a chord, let's say an F major chord, so whatever notes, now we could choose for this to be our step size or the length. So let's say if I wanted this to be 8th note triplets, or let's say we'll make it, you know, straight 8th notes, or let's make it a dotted 16th note. We can just kind of come or 30-second note. So that would be kind of the rhythmic value. So you say, okay, I want to do 30-second notes. And let's say if we wanted to do 8th notes, let's say we want to do 8th notes here, and we wanted to make the length 30-second note. You can have a little bit of a pause in between. But let's make this a, so if we wanted this to be held longer, or if I wanted these to, and as we work with this, we could just choose to, you know, have this fit within like an octave and a half, or we could say, let's make it fit within 2 octaves. So now when we get into sequences, at this point, what you could do is actually just drag a particular phrase. So let's say if I wanted to take a, let's come over here to like a MIDI pattern. Say like an electric bass part here. Say, let's find something a little more interesting. So let's say if I have this pattern, what I could do now is just drag this sequence directly into this sequence here. So we could just say, okay, I want to drag this sequence. And now when I play a chord, that we could actually just kind of, so you could, again, just kind of drag even in different sequences. And then when you go to play mode, you could have it, you know, just do different arpeggiations, voicings, repeats. So you could have it, you know, just come over here if you wanted to transpose that up an octave as well. You could just come right over here and set these different functions. So again, it's just kind of a, you know, an arpeggiator in kind of classic mode. And then you could take kind of MIDI sequences and drag those in and have the arpeggiator based upon the actual sequence as well. All right. All right, we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas. We have Isaac checking in. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Bear with me. All right, so we have a question. Can you please show us how to prepare a metal recording template, including plugins and processing for this kind of music? It'll save us a lot of time. Thanks in advance. So, you know, I mean, every project will be a little different, but what a lot of people may do is, let's say, we'll do a new project. Okay, so let's say we want to add audio tracks. We'll make, let's say for drums, and let's just say we'll make it like 12 audio tracks, and let's so I will just kind of come over here and we'll, you know, we'll call it snare top, snare bottom, so you could just kind of come over here, you know, call it Tom 1, Tom 2, Tom 3, etc. So let's say you want it, and you know, we'll make this overhead left, overhead right, and we'll call it room left, room right. Okay, so we can now come over here. I want to place all of these into a folder. So we'll just move these tracks, move the selected tracks to a new folder called drums. And let's go ahead and route all of my drums to a group. So we'll add a group channel to the selected channels. We'll make sure that it's going to be in stereo. So now we have our group channel. Let's add 2 guitars. So let's go ahead, add 2 guitar tracks. Okay, and let's say on these particular guitars, we wanted to have the VST amp rack. So we'll go to distortion, turn that on, and let's come over here for distortion. Okay, let's add another track for bass. And we'll add the VST bass amp. So if you want some Ampeg-esque goodness, you could do that. And let's go ahead and add some vocals tracks. And let's say a synth track, so we could just kind of come over here. Let's say we want a retro log synth of some kind, and we'll put that. So at this point, you could have kind of, you could just kind of come over here, and let me just take the guitars and vocal tracks here out of the folder. So, and then once you kind of do this, that could be a great basis for a template. And if you have like your snare top and bottom, you may want to go to like the bottom snare. Typically done is to come over here and reverse the polarity on that. So, and save that as a template. And, you could be just kind of tracking very quickly. So if you have like a studio drum kit, and the guitar's all mic'd up, you could get going really quickly that way. So, and to save it as a template, just come over here, say save template, save as template, and we will call this, Rock Band, and hit OK. And now when we go to new project, we could just come right over here, go under more, and choose Rock Band, and you could have all those settings automatically recalled for you. Okay. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, is there a sound quality difference between Cubase 12 Dolby Atmos and Nuendo 12 Dolby Atmos? There's some, there are some differences in capabilities, like, the Cubase, like the Nuendo Dolby Atmos will allow you to go, to have multiple beds, as well as be able to work with external renderers. But I think if the conditions were set the same, that there'd be the same sound quality between them. All right, so we have Alex S. checking in from Berlin. See Michael Pierce. So, yeah, Michael had shared, there's a video on one of the, that I saw in a Facebook group of someone in 1997 making a dance track in an early version of Cubase and it was, I think, a BBC show. So it was perhaps the first time someone tweeted on a computer. So well back, they're visionary with that, but the dance track wasn't so good, I thought. But it was an interesting piece and kind of a nice time capsule to look back at a version of Cubase from 25 years ago and see how much it's progressed. Okay, so we have a question. How do I change the key of a song in a project that has multiple tracks already set up? So if it's, audio or MIDI, you could have some different things. But let's say if I wanted to take like a number of tracks here and change the key of this, so often we may not want to, do a key change on drums if they're not really kind of, tonally based. But let's say if I'm playing this and I wanted to transpose, I could select all the events here. And let's just come directly to transpose. So this way we could transpose. And we could do this basically for audio and MIDI parts. So if you want like a really heavy, so the drums aren't transposing, but the guitar. So again, just by selecting the events and from the info line, just selecting transpose right there. So if you wanted, singer's like, oh, it's just the worst key. If it was only down one step, you could just boom, move all the note-based, like the harmonic, tonality-based parts and transpose that and see if it's a good fit for the key for the particular singer. All right, and we have Stefan from Sweden checking in. All right, and we have Odivali checking in. Great to see you again. You see Best Cream Jesus is on from San Diego area. All right, we have Roland who's watching on his way home on a bus from work. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California. All right, so Jay from Connecticut asks, question, is it possible for the logical editor to generate reports? Example, select target tracks, logical editor, .text file generated showing target tracks, fundamental, average, 3 top harmonic frequencies. So there isn't, it's more for doing particular edits. So it's not going to necessarily point out and generate like a text file of findings from the logical editor. So it's not really, it's intended more for, again, doing a particular edit on tracks or media that meet certain criteria. So, but it won't automatically generate a text file, but I think most people would rather want it to do edits based on based on tracks or content that meets the condition as opposed to a report. So I think it makes more sense for it to actually just do that. And I'm not sure, if people would need a report to do it. So it might be somewhere backward, within the code, but there's nothing that actually, generates a particular report showing, results of a criteria search from the logical editor. All right, so we have Thermonuclear Ore. Good to see you back from Serbia. All right, so we see question. Hello, Greg. Can I move the cycle loop to the left or to the right with the keyboard? So I know if we wanted to move like the cycle locators, that we could do this. I'm not sure if there's a keyboard shortcut for that to move it. So if we come here, most of the events, if you wanted to set, there's keyboard shortcuts where we could set the left and right locators based on particular positions, but I don't know of a keyboard shortcut to move the left and right locators, but it's easy enough to kind of just grab it here. You might be able to, if it was, I wanted to take this selection, there's a preference here. So say if we go to editing where cycle follows range selection. So, if I just select a particular range, that range, the cycle markers will automatically be set directly to that range. So I'm not sure if that is helpful. So if you're using the range, but I don't know of a way with a keyboard shortcut to move that, but it's pretty easy just to kind of grab it when you see it turn into a hand. And then you could just kind of move it like so. But you can set, manually input the left and right locator positions with keyboard shortcuts, but not move it if that's what you wanted to do, that I know. All right, so we see Cubase Strunky on. All right, so we have a question from David Lamers. How to use montage sounds using a UR824. So, with the montage, obviously we can send MIDI to the montage, and the montage generates the sound with its own engine. And the sound generation, unlike a virtual instrument, is done outside of the computer. So to capture that, what we would need to do is go to your studio menu to audio connections, and you'll have a tab for external instruments. So you could select a montage here and say, this is connected into these inputs on my audio interface. So now that we have these inputs defined, we know that as we want to do processing, that the audio from the montage that's being generated is now being sent back into the computer. So to add that as an instrument, we would go to, like we're adding a virtual instrument, and you'll see under the external plugin categories, you can just add the montage right there, and then that will be routed directly out to your montage, and then the sounds would now return from the montage back into Cubase, and this would allow you to then process with the standard EQ and effect plugins. All right. Yeah. So we see from Dallas LaRue says, thanks for the info, Greg. Our Apache opens up a whole new world of creativity. So it certainly does. So I like using those because I'm not a skilled keyboard player at all. It's not my primary instrument, and I should just practice after 30 years of doing this. But my schedule is busy. That's my excuse. All right, so we have a question from P. Stevens. Does anyone know how he made the tracks have a gradient effect when adding them? So let's say if we do a new project. So if we wanted to do this, we can go to your preferences. And I think if you go to, see, track and mix console channel colors. So, and there's a preference here for auto track channel color mode. So if we do this and say, okay, we're going to use the track's default color, and I add a couple of audio tracks, they're all kind of gray. But if I wanted them to kind of automatically increment, I would just use the previous track color +1. So now when I go to add multiple tracks, they'll automatically be colorized, and that will just kind of go through the different colors that you have in your scheme right here. So give that preference a try. So again, under preferences, user interface, track and mix console channel colors, use previous track color +1. So give that a shot, and then that will automatically kind of increment the colors as you add it to make it look prettier. All right, so we just see, is there any way to highlight a MIDI region and detect what scale the notes the region are in? Okay, so let's just jump back. Okay, so let's say I want to take this. All right, so if you go in the key editor, and this was introduced in version 11, that you can come over here and have Cubase kind of automatically figure out, the scale. So when we look at this, we can see scale suggestions. So here we could say, okay, it's going to be a C major or a D blues 1 scale. So you could just come right over here and at this point, just be able to look at the scales directly here that Cubase can generate. So in the scale assistant, you can now just come over there and adjust the scale accordingly there. So that will detect the particulars. So that will, sorry, just had an email pop in. That will determine the scales right there. Okay, so Michael Pierce says, I forgot to smash the like button. Don't be like me. And he says, and hashtag cool kids. So it's a good album by the band Kicks. So, but yes, hit the like button. That allows us to continue to do these live streams. We appreciate everyone's support. Okay, so we have Benny from Sweden checking in. And we have Tal Sizer checking in from Phoenix. Thanks for joining us. We have Soren from Sweden. All right, we have John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, so we have a question from Matt Elder. Could you please explain how to save drum maps for different third-party drum software programs? Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I'll just activate this project. Sorry about that. And I'm going to add, let's say, an instrument, and I wanted it to be, we'll just find a drum sound, maybe like in Halligan Sonic SE. Okay, so let's say we have a hardcore kit. All right, so if we wanted to make a drum map and save it, so I'm going to just kind of create, let's come over here first, and I'm going to go to the primary inspector tab, and then we will just choose drum map setup. So once we're here, all right, so we could just, at this point, just say new map. And let's come over here. All right, I'll just... remove some of these. So once you're here, you could just type in the name. So as we click, you could say, okay, this is rim shot. And just kind of, you could click just to the left. And then once this is all configured, at this point, all you'd have to do is just click on save. And then once you save that particular drum map, you can call it up in later sessions as well. So once you come over here, you could just load up different drum maps, and they could be stored kind of wherever you have them stored on your hard disk. So you could do that pretty quickly for most third-party plugins. I remember way back when I did all the drum maps for the Alesis D4 when it came out. So took an afternoon for the whole drum module. All right, and we have Matt Elston checking in from London. All right, and we have Raiz Rahim checking in. We have Glenn Dozier from Suffolk, Virginia. Thanks for joining. Glad to have a fellow Virginian on the live stream. All right, so we have a question from Benny. Can you show me a little more how I do when I want to get a MIDI track out to sheet music in the score editor? So let's take a quick look. Just look for one project here. Has more MIDI stuff in it. Okay, I'll just look at this one. All right. So a lot of times when, you know, first thing you want to do is just to select the particular event. So at this point, I'm going to find, let's say, a Rhodes part. So let's say if we listen to this Rhodes, that we can Wurlitzer. So, and when we look at this, we may notice that this is all maybe a little bit ahead of the beat. So many times if we just hit like Control or Command R, or we go to Scores to open Score Editor, because this was played like, you know, not strictly to the actual click track, you know, you may get like weird musical interpretations like this. But if we wanted to clean this up, really all you'd have to do is to come here. Let's go to our main tab. So you double click here or go to the score menu to score settings. And at this point we could choose, okay, I think this is in the key of A flat. I want this to be a grand staff. Let's come over here and we have a display quantize. So I could say the smallest note that I intended rhythmically was an eighth note. The smallest rest I intended was a quarter note rest. And then maybe, you know, it's swinging a little bit. I wanted to, you know, there's a bit of shuffle. We can consolidate rest. So when I take this, we can now just click on apply and we can see that that's much easier for musicians to read, that you can pass on to musician and they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. So that's how you could just come right over there, and then from that point you could just print out the sheet music right from there. Okay, and this is getting back to our rock template. So it says, Greg, please, can we insert plugins like EQ, compressors, etc. in the master out before starting the recording to have more motivating sound during the recording? Thanks, Greg. You could, but you know, I think you may achieve a more inspiring sound capturing the sources in a motivational way. So if you are doing a lot of, you know, so I think if you capture the sources in as inspired a manner as possible, that's a better solution. But if you wanted to, in your template, have EQs and compressors, but, you know, often, unless you have a specific, you know, this is the studio guitar amp that everyone uses and everyone comes here for my drum sound in this room where it's going to be a fixed kind of thing that people are seeking, then I would say go for it. But a lot of times people may, you know, want their own unique sounds. So I think if you know, the best solution would be to kind of make sure that the sounds that you're just capturing sound great and are motivational and are inspiring, instead of, you know, trying to do it with plugins. You can do that if it's just not going to work. But that would be probably my preferred method of doing that. All right, so we have a question from Balsa. It says, hi, Greg from Montenegro. So glad you could join us. In a project with 2 tempos, change in tempo track, does a same audio event lock in tempo in both parts of the song? All right, so we'll just start with a new project. So if it's in musical mode, it can. So let's say at this point, we'll have a new project. I'm just going to go to loops. All right, so let's say I have this loop going on, and I'm going to, when I select this particular loop, just put this in bars and beats, we'll have this in musical mode. Okay, so now I'm going to add a tempo track so that when we come here, we're going to say right at this measure, we're going to ramp up. We'll just say, okay, let's just step up our tempo. So now as we play, but if we don't have these events, so we have this one event, if this isn't set to musical mode, it would kind of play back the original tempo. But now when it's placed into musical mode, that's when it will follow the changes of the project right there. So as long as your audio is in musical mode, if it's already been recorded, you could do that. Sometimes people will like play along or sing along to audio that will kind of stretch in musical mode, and then you wouldn't necessarily put that track in musical mode. If you recorded something that was slower and then sped up, you wouldn't need to put the track into musical mode because it's responding to the existing tempo track, and other audio files that are not in musical mode will automatically follow the tempo changes. All right, so we have Larry checking in from Brooklyn, New York. Thanks for joining us. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, my chat field jumped, so I'm just finding my spot. Okay, so I just see from a comment, Cubase is a bit hard on my eye. Is there any way of changing it? So yeah, you can change. You know, if you come over here to your preferences, we can choose, you know, when we come over here to different color schemes. So if we say, okay, I want the project area background to be a little lighter, we could do that. Editor areas, so we could come over here and kind of just change many of the different colors. So all the colors are custom configurable, different mixer, you know, mixed console channel color types are going to be set to different colors, and these can all be changed as well. So you could easily kind of just change many of the different functions directly in for user interface to kind of suit your needs. So if you wanted to just come over here, again, go to preferences and go to user interface. So we could just say, okay, let's go to defaults, hit apply. So many things are highly customizable for however you want. So you see Michael Pierce just about kind of with the rock band templates is usually Michael Pierce just indicates usually about halfway through a session, I realize I haven't got the desk's master bus compressor on and slap one on Cubase's instead. So no problem being able to add your effects whenever you need. All right, so we have Barry from Trinidad and Tobago. Glad you could join us today. All right, and we have Jason Genova on the live stream. Okay, so we just see Greg, please, question. How drums multi-channel output works with Groove Agent? All right, so we'll show you this. So there's kind of, two different ways of working with Groove Agent. So when we'll start off here, I'll activate this particular project and I will revert it. Okay, so if we wanted to have multiple outputs, because we could have kind of two different modes in Groove Agent where we could have kind of the acoustic agent. So if we're playing here, so I go to my mix console, everything is now being mapped to one stereo output. But if I wanted, we could have 32 stereo outs from Groove Agent. So if I say, let's take output 2 for the snare, and I want my hi-hat to be on output 3, and let's say my overheads, output 4, and output 5 would be my rooms. So now we can just come over here, and if I wanted to, and let's say, okay, and we could listen to that in the room. So that's how we could do it on like an acoustic agent kit just from the mixer, and then you could route it to any of the 32 stereo outs. If we were doing this with a more like an MPC styled beat agent kit, we can now come over. So let's say we're playing a particular pattern here. All right, let me just change some of the quick sounds here. Okay, so let's just say we were so right now everything is going through a stereo output again, but if we go to the instrument, now we could select, so let's say I want the snare to go out of output 2 and my clap to go out of output 2 as well. And I want my hi-hat to go out of output 3. So this way we could just click on the pad. And let's say I want this snare to go out of out 2. So this way we could just come over here and route. So as you select the pads, we could send these to different outputs right there. So that'd be all you have to do. So either like a beat agent kit or a acoustic agent kit, we could do, 32 stereo outputs on either of those. So should cover most needs. All right, John Costigan wants people to press the like button because you'll feel better about it. So John's a smart guy, so we won't doubt his opinion. All right, and we have Charles K checking in from the UK. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you on the live stream again. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelsky just indicating if you want to get confused with scale, study some Bartok melodies. That's what you get for listening to all that folk music of the era. All right, so we have Nick Saya on. Thanks for joining us. I got your email that you got your effect figured out for you. All right, so we have a question from Jerome Gibson. Are we able to filter out MIDI data CC being sent out of the transport? My Roland W30 appears, shows MIDI overload when I press play on Cubase. Thanks. Okay, so all right, so I'm not sure. So Roland W30, that's probably 1989. So the Roland keyboards at that time were kind of notorious for transmitting a lot of aftertouch. So the one thing that I would do, so if you hit play, so it's probably not the play that's sending the MIDI overload into your system. What I would do, and I may have filtered this out already. Let me see if I could find, see if it's in recent projects here. Okay, so we'll take a look. I think we could see in this project. All right, so sometimes if you press down on a key, and the Roland keyboards were kind of notorious for this, like you may see, like you look at it and if you see MIDI overload, you kind of look at this and go, oh, you know, it doesn't seem like there's, you know, just MIDI note messages. Why is it overloading when being sent to the device? But go into the MIDI editor here and go to the MIDI menu and open the list editor. And here you may notice that and the list editor kind of actually shows every single MIDI event. So things that may not be apparent in, you know, a MIDI key editor where it's, okay, it's set to show velocity in my notes. Here I could see that we have a lot of aftertouch messages. And this is like when people press on the keys and maybe they press down a little bit. Some of the Roland keyboards of this era and Roland D50s were notorious for this. You know, you press down and it's almost kind of like a modulation wheel to change the sound. So if you have like an organ, you could press down and that could kick the Leslie effect in. A lot of times it doesn't really do much for the sound, but it could send gobs of MIDI messages that can overload. So with instruments of that era from Roland, I would go into the list editor, and probably what you could do is select, and you may notice that you'll have like a filters area here. So once we go to the setup window, you want to activate the filters, and we could select, if you see a lot of aftertouch messages, try to just come over here and say you want to filter event types. So now I could say, okay, here's all of my aftertouch messages. And then just do like a command or control A to select all and just try deleting it and see if that clears it up if you have a lot of aftertouch messages. And also if your W30 is connected, something else that could be causing MIDI overloads on your W30, if you're synchronizing it to external MIDI timecode or MIDI clock, that could be sending extra information into your W30, and you could turn that on or off when you go to the project synchronization setup. So, you know, because I think the W30 was its own sampling workstation at the time. So if you were trying to send MIDI timecode or MIDI clock to that, and, you know, and unless you were syncing the internal sequencer, you know, check that as well and turn that off. All right, so just see Dom released a video today regarding a new feature based on the newest dot release of Cubase 12. Wondering if there was only one or could you share a few new ones? So I think with 12.01 added, obviously Dolby Atmos and the ability to freeze multiple tracks simultaneously. I think 12.02 was more with kind of more maintenance releases, just kind of standard bugs and optimizations. But you know, the 12.0 to 12.01 was a significant increase. Also, some differences with marker display that came in 12.01 as well. So I'm trying to think of anything that specifically came out in 12.02 that was a new feature rather than kind of optimization of pre-existing features. So. All right, so we have DJ Kenny Lee Beats checking in from South Africa. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Jean-Marie Horvat. Thanks for joining us. You'll be our celebrity audio engineer today, along with Michael Finlayson. Okay, so we see just a question. Thanks for the scale suggestion tip. I tried it on a bass line I played, and the assistant found 5 possible scales. Can one phrase fit multiple scales? Certainly. You know, if you think of, you know, every phrase that fits C major also technically could be an A minor. You know, so yeah, it could fit multiple scales pretty easily. All right, so we have Detlef checking in from Dusseldorf. Okay, so we have a question. Is there any ARPs? So, like we showed just a bit earlier with, you know, let's say if I wanted to come to piano, I'll just make this a little louder. So if you want to do arpeggios, we can go to the MIDI inserts. So if we want to go to like Apache 5. So as I just hold down a chord, and you could choose for this not to be, you know, if you want to do dotted 16th note to different rhythmics values. Or if you wanted to have an even more extensive arpeggiator, just what we showed a bit earlier, Apache SX. So at this point, you could just, you know, load in and drag and drop different musical phrases and use that as the basis for the arpeggiator. So you can find lots of arpeggiators between those two plugins. Okay, so question from Jean-Marie. I have a dumb question when exporting binaural from the ADS export. Correct. Is it possible to make an MP4 for clients to listen to their iPods? Currently, there isn't an MP4 option. I think Steinberg's kind of looking into it. I know it's a common way for some people with spatial, you know, to preview spatial stuff, but you know, there's still a lot of unknowns with it. But I know that Steinberg is kind of doing some research on that as we speak. Okay, just going through comments. Okay, so we have a question. I wish there was a feature that would allow you to put MIDI track in mono. So, generally MIDI itself doesn't have a mono stereo capability. Instrument tracks, they're going to virtual instruments, those can be set to stereo or mono, but it really depends on the instrument itself. So it's the instrument itself that defines if it has mono or stereo outputs. So, some instruments will have mono outputs. Some, like, even Howlian 6 will have 5.1 outputs as well. So it's really whatever the instrument itself supports. It's not a limitation in Cubase, but the vast majority of instruments will be running in stereo. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to put creative effects while auditioning sounds and samples before importing them in a project to hear them in better context if I know in advance that they'll be processed? So if you wanted to audition, different sounds, like maybe with a delay or something like that. So what we could do is come over here to the control room, and let's go to the main area. And let's just say I want a delay. So we'll just put a mono delay on. We'll make it a quarter note delay. So now as we come over here and audition different drum loops, I'll just find some different loops here. So if we bypass this particular plugin, so let's say, just go back to something that's a little more obvious here. So now if I wanted to audition that with the delay on, I could just click on it, and now so you could just put the effect in the control room as a creative effect for auditioning if you wanted to. It's probably a good idea to make sure that once you're done, that you could turn your delay off as well if you wonder why everything sounds weird. All right, so we have Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. Thanks for joining us. All right. So we see, hi, Greg, is there a way to disable write automation after each pass? So if it is, if we're automating something, so let's say if we come here. So really all you have to do is just click on. So let's say if we automate, if you just hit the W button, that would automatically bypass the writing of automation. So you could just hit W, and now this will respond, read the automation, and now I could adjust it accordingly here, just like that. But we could have our automation points. Just hit the letter W. Let me know if that works for you. And that will disable writing of the automation and play back the existing automation. All right, Rick France from Oregon wants people to hit the like button if they haven't already. we see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we just see from Best Korean Jesus. Not sure if this is allowed, so no real rules. But I have a question about Pad Shop. In the art page, in the tempo box, bottom left, there's a MIDI file, groove quantize. I've dropped MIDI, not sure what it does. So let's take a look. All right. Okay, so let's see if we can find this. Okay, so we have a MIDI file. So let's look in the bottom. A MIDI file groove quantize. All right, so it's a all right, so just so in the page, in the MIDI, and in the tempo box, bottom left. So I don't see there's a MIDI file groove quantize. I've dropped MIDI, not sure what it does. So it may just kind of take the timing of a MIDI file and apply that. But I don't see the part that you're describing. But I think that's what it's going to do is maybe, if you have like a particular, let's say kind of like maybe like a Teddy Riley type groove to it, that you could apply that to the arpeggiator if that's in the MIDI file itself. But let me know if I'm looking in the right area. I think that would be kind of where it's at. But yeah, if you could let me know in the chat, I'd appreciate it. All right. So we see a question checking in from Dallas. When programming drums in Groove Agent, are you able to render drums in mono in Cubase? So if you send it to an output and to a mono group, you could do that. But realize that when you're listening to the sounds in Groove Agent, if you want it to be the same throughout, you would probably, realize that as you're listening to it, that, it's often going to be in stereo. So a lot of people want to do mono, but don't realize that the samples that they're listening to are in stereo and may have stereo effects processing and stuff like that already. But if we wanted to, we'll just go back to this project here quickly. So let's say we go to our urban ballads here. All right, so let's say we now want to, we're going to send this to output 8. Okay, and then let's send this to a mono group. Okay, so this will be our group. So when we hit the pad, and then if I wanted to add an audio track here, so we'll add audio, we'll make it a mono track, and we'll feed its input from the group. So now as we would, let's say, place this into record. All right, so now now that it's been sent to a mono group, you could see that we've now recorded it as mono directly that way. So, but realize that most of the sounds are in stereo, and when you're playing them in Groove Agent are going through stereo processing. But if you wanted to record it as mono, you could do that. Send it to an output, send the output to a mono group, and then just simply set audio tracks as inputs, or you could do a render in place at that point. Okay, reading through comments. All right, and we have Spike Williams checking in from Cardiff in the UK. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way you can jump directly to an arranger event via tab or similar? So let me open up a project with arranger tracks on it. Okay, we'll get this activated. Okay, so let's say we have our arranger track. So if I'm here, we could just jump, just by clicking on it. So let's say, if we have our different arranger chains kind of even while it's playing. So let's say we'll start off here. So check my routing, make sure. Oh, sorry. All right, so let's say we want to just go to. All right, let me just activate the Ranger track here. So you could just go to the next chain step here. And let's see if there's, I know you could set up keyboard shortcuts for that. But even if you just, so if you just come here, you can say, okay, let's go to, or previous chain step. So you could, I guess, configure the tab key maybe to actually do that. But if you wanted to, at this point, just, you know, you could use keyboard shortcuts just to go to previous and next tab. Okay, so we have a question. How do I get my chord pads to reflect the click response when I hit my pads? I'm trying to get it to respond more like a one shot versus continuous, which is what my mouse does. All right, so right, is that your mouse, as we're doing chord pads, let me just come over here. So let's see if you, so we could think of your mouse as not really having, so if I hold my mouse down and then let go of it, as soon as I press my mouse button down, the chord plays, I let go. At that point, it will hold until I let go. So, but it may not trigger kind of a one shot because it's actually looking for input from you. So as soon as you let go of the chord, it's going to, so I release the mouse button from press down, then it releases the chord. So if you want it, let me just see if there's any settings to change that behavior. I don't think that there is, but we'll take a look just in case. Let's see if we change the latch. So it's going to be kind of mimicking, you know, as soon as I release the mouse, then it will go, but I don't think it's going to function maybe where we, so that is kind of the click response when you hit the pads. So as soon as I let go, Best Green Jesus, I hold the mouse down, I let go, then the chord stops. So press down, let go, let go. So just try instead of, it will, if you just kind of click, it will sound for, I think, a measure. But if you hold the mouse button down, then it will release as soon as you let go of the mouse. So you could kind of have it play, I think, but hold down the mouse button and then release, and then you could change the duration like that. So give that a try and let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see, is Cubase ever going to have out a DAW console controller like PreSonus or SSL? So, you know, we've had a number of controllers. We were the first company that did it with the Houston controller way back when in 2000. You know, there is a Yamaha Nuage if you want like a really professional solution. You know, but you could easily use the PreSonus or SSL because they just used Mackie control protocols. So, you know, it's kind of an older protocol, about 27 years old-ish or so. So there's some, you know, some rough edges with it in more contemporary operating systems. But, you know, you could also, what was recently discontinued with part shortages was the CC121, but that's a phenomenal controller as well. So, but any of the controllers, especially with the new MIDI remote control system, will give you a tremendous amount of flexibility so you're not tied into a proprietary controller if you don't want to be. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we see a question. Are there any third-party MIDI inserts available? So I don't know if it's open for other developers to do it, but I'm not sure if it's closed either, you know. So, but I don't know of any third-party MIDI inserts. Okay, so we see a question, Greg, please, I'd like to know a bit about backup. So let's say if we have a project and maybe we were sloppy with our naming conventions and we have files that are, you know, immediately like kind of spread all over the place or lots of unused files. At this point, you know, Cubase, when you start a project, it's ideal and Cubase will prompt you to for a project location, and ideally you'd want to have all of the features, all of the components for each project in its own unique folder. Some people may put multiple projects in a folder. So, and if you wanted to archive the project, you could just come right over here to the file menu to backup project. It's going to ask you to define a new folder. And what it will do is basically copy all of the files over to the new folder. You'll be asked if you want to minimize audio files. So let's say if you have, you know, a 2-hour recording and you use 10 seconds of it, that it will only use the 10 seconds and not back up the, you know, 1 hour, 59 minutes and 50 seconds of unused audio. You could also do your offline processing permanent. You can remove unused files. and that will give you some options. And this will back up everything into a brand new project folder. So that's how you could do a backup. So we see, hi Greg, one of my MIDI keyboards is sending random MIDI information to Cubase. Is there a way to block all MIDI information except the notes? So you could come over to the input transformer. So one, the best solution would be find out why your keyboard is sending random messages, but we could go to the input transformer in version 12. It's right here. In earlier versions, it was kind of a little icon that appeared right here below the edit channel settings. And we could come over here. Let's do project and let's open the panel. And we could just come over here. So let's say I want to filter, and we'll say, all right, so we'll activate the module. Okay, so what we could do is now we're going to filter everything that's unequal to notes. So this way, only notes will go through, and we won't have any like extraneous MIDI controllers, sustain, modulation wheel, pitch bend, program changes, etc. So just come over here in the input transformer. Again, in 11 and earlier, it's this little kind of squiggly line right here. And in version 12, you'll see the input transform. We can do this on a project level. So you could just have that kind of activated. So we'll choose filter everything. So basically we're going to filter everything that is unequal to a MIDI note message. And that's what you can do. But ideally find out why your MIDI controller is transmitting information. And if you want to see what information it is transmitting, go to the MIDI inserts and come right over here to MIDI monitor, and you can see what messages are being transmitted by your controller. So ideally, you'd want your controller not to transmit random information, but if in a pinch, if you need to do that. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, so we have John Shaman checking in. Thanks for joining. All right, we have Roland Klein. He's checking in from Sweden, and he's home at last. So thanks for joining us. All right, so so Greg, the other day I told you about huge lagging and mouse freezing when I have Cubase 12 with VE Pro 7. It turned out it's a Cubase issue, so there's an update, 0.30 coming out. Any idea, please? So, I usually just, it's part of my non-disclosure agreement for testing. I can't really reply when new versions will be coming out, but they're always actively developing, so. All right, so we see from Best Korean Jesus about giving me a hint to where the pad shop setting was. All right, so It's the box with the MIDI icon. All right, just load up a preset here again. Okay, so I see the MIDI icon here. It has an arrow in the tempo box. Okay, so let's see if we come here, if we drag. We load up a preset here. Okay, so let's say. All right, so if I want to take just this MIDI information here and drop it in. So let me just make something that I know is a little different. Just going to create a part. Okay, and I'm just going to do a quick swing on this. And we could even come over to the quantizer plugin as well. And I'll just apply. Okay, so let's say, turn my snap off. Okay, so now let's say I have this event here. And let me just find. Load up just kind of a more straightforward preset. Okay, so let's say. right, and let's take the timing of this part and add that to the groove. So if we turn that off, so it seems like that changed kind of the rhythmic value of it. So let's say if we come over here, let's turn that off. So you hear, I think, rhythmic difference. So I think that's what it's going to be. I could do some more research if you want to email me afterwards, but it looks like you could kind of have the different arpeggiators as the groove here and just kind of drag that over. I could play around to see if I get a better example. It's more audible for Tuesday's live stream. All right, so we have a question. Can you please show an example of the scale assistant? All right, so let's go back to... All right, so I'll look at scale assistant here. So let's say, okay, look at this part. All right, so we see that we could have different scales here, but let's say I know that this song is in, let's say, D major. So now at this point, we could choose to snap pitch editing. And at this point, so now if I wanted to move notes to particular keys at this point, you're not going to be able to move a particular note out of the key of the song. And this one part may be locked. Let me just go to another project here to show. So here we could actually have it kind of do the analysis of, so we could choose, let's say we want to do D blues scale for this. All right. So now we can, as we're in the editor, so I'll go to a full screen editor here. We could do the snap pitch editing. So it's only going to fall on notes. So as I move notes up, so let's say I want to make this C major, and I wanted to put this, that you could actually just kind of choose to snap so that it's only going to fall on notes that are within the scale. And then you could also choose to show pitches from the scale assistant, or if you only want to see notes that fall within the scale, or if you wanted to show pitches only with events, or if you wanted to see all pitches, we can just kind of come right over here. So we could just do snap pitch editing. You could also do live input. So if you wanted to only hear, like as you record in, that it won't actually play notes that are out of the key. So we also see Cubase Chunky just mentioning like the Nectar controllers and stuff like that that you could utilize with Cubase. Yeah, I'm using a P4 for all of my live streams. All right, so we have a question from Jan. My scrub tool suddenly stopped working. There will be no sound. How do I get the sound back? And it's from Jan from Cubase Index. All right, so let's say if we come over and we listen to kind of our scrub tool, and I'll make this louder. So All right, so as we listen to that, now if we wanted to choose this to be a scrub, make sure that the sound is routed through the control room, because generally like the scrubbing gets routed through the control room. So make sure that you have kind of the audio connections set up and that you have the control room configured for your monitoring source, because if it's just routed to the outputs, you won't hear it. So if I disabled my control room setup, and let's go to the outputs here, then now I could play. So I don't hear any of the scrubbing. But if we grab the play tool, we don't hear this. So go to, again, to the audio connections and go to the control room here. Get that routed. And now you should be able to. And if we do set it to scrub mode, at that point you could just hear it right there. So give that a shot and that should probably help. So we just see, hi Greg, will Cubase continually release new scripts for MIDI controllers? I would love to see one for the Novation SL Mark III MIDI keyboard. Thanks, Chris. So, you know, I know Steinberg has been in touch with the different controller companies, and I think the thinking is that, you know, we're working closely with them so that, you know, and obviously they know the capabilities under the hood of their controllers, probably better than anyone else, that the companies themselves will be releasing the MIDI controller scripts. So I think that will be how it's going, so that we're not maintaining all the controllers, but it's going to be the companies offering the capability. So you could have advanced control directly from the companies that made the controllers. All right. All right, so we see TP's kind of made the jump back to Cubase from Ableton for doing a lot of sound design work. So congratulations and welcome back. All right, so we see Kay Hardy says, thanks, Greg, coming from an MPC 3000 and moving towards a Groove Agent. So I think you'll be happy. All right, so we have the Monk Beats checking in from Italy, and he was number 78, smash of the like button. So great to see you back. Thanks for hitting the like button. All right, and we see Mark Rabin has woken up to snow in Montana, while everyone else is having all sorts of hot weather in the East Coast here in the United States. I think we're going to hit 92 today here in Fahrenheit. My chat field just jumped on me. So just try to find my spot. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. Sorry about that. All right, so we have a question from the Monk Beats. In Cubase 11, I had to use all of my 24 in and out of my audio cards for external instruments, effects, speakers, all busy. So now I have the famous problem of the status line warning. Any solution? I'm not sure if I'm familiar with the status line recording warning. So if you could tell what the so if you could tell me what the warning message is. So I think I have a number of external gear, external outboard gear in my studio, and I usually don't have a message. I'm not sure if I have every input and output utilized. All right. So we see from DCA Mitch or DC Armich 00 says, I saw Modi X in your external instrument list. How do you like the Modi X6 key bed? So I don't have one. So I may have just added it, like if someone asked this, like during a live stream, I have a Modi X, how do I configure it as a external instrument? So I probably just typed in the name, but I don't have one. But I think generally all the Yamaha key beds are very high quality and tend to last a lot longer than other keyboards. So okay, so we see Greg, can you show me question how to do the drop 2 voicing with four note chords using the logical editor? Because I know if I do it with logical editor, I could do things way more faster. All right, so I'm not sure if make sure I got the chord voicings correct here, but I think we can maybe do something for you here. So let's say all right, so I'm going to come over here to the chord pads. Okay, so I'm not sure if it's like you want to like take the second note of the chord like this and drop it down an octave, something like that. So let me just come over here and let's set up a logical editor. Okay, so let's say we want to transform, and we're going to take MIDI notes, and we're going to do a context variable, and we'll say is equal to position in chord, and we'll say, or let's say our minor third or major third. And let's come over here, take value 1 and subtract by 12. So if you wanted to do something like So if you want to do that, you know, I could say let's take all the thirds, and maybe this would help. Cubase chunky. But you could say, okay, position within a chord. You could also say number of notes within a chord. So that maybe that is what you mean when to drop 4-note chords with the drop 2 voicing. So maybe something like that, or if you want to take the third and be able to do stuff like that. So let me know if that is what you wanted, or if you have like just maybe specific intervals that you wanted to do. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we're glad that Mark Rabin's dog Stella is excited about the snow. All right. So see from Best Screen Jesus, his mouse acts like a one-shot on a chord pad, but he'll tinker around. So please excuse his random questions. It's random questions that keep me employed, so we're always glad to help. All right, so we see Gareth is on the live stream from Bilbao, Spain. Member of Hot Mess. We haven't seen Michael Teams yet. Glad you can make it, Gareth. All right, so we see Neil Conway, and we have Troca. So we see Michael Pierce indicating someone with 640 pounds for CC 121. So. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so a question from Edmund Lord. Is it possible to see MIDI event of all tracks when rewinding from the start because the screen showing the enlarged, not the beginning of the event? Okay, so let's see, we want to see the MIDI event of all tracks when rewinding from the start because the screen showing the enlarged, not the beginning. Okay, so let's say if I have a number of MIDI tracks here, so I'm not sure if I understand a question. So to see the MIDI event of all tracks when rewinding from the start. So if we're at the beginning and we're rewinding from the start to the screen, because the screen showing the enlarged, not the beginning of the event. So if we're at kind of the beginning of the event, so maybe I don't understand. So let's say if I'm just rewinding, so let's see, maybe it's something kind of like this where we rewind. So it could be maybe the follow event. So it is maybe set this if you hit the letter F. So let's see if I turn this off, and maybe I'm not sure if I'm understanding correctly or not. But let's say if I'm here and I have follow disabled and I rewind, it doesn't update. But if I have the follow auto scroll turned on here and then rewind, it'll automatically kind of update the view while winding. So try hitting the letter F, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding, which I'm afraid I am. All right. When doing retrospective recording, is there a way that Cubase can automatically determine the tempo? Not, you know, if you're just kind of here, you know, if you know, if there's no kind of, you know, tempo about it, you know, so let's say I'm here and I, you know, have my Rhodes and all right, and now I activate the retrospective recording. Okay. And I'm going to turn off my auto quantize to start with. So sorry about that. So let's say all right, so say I do, and now we put our retrospective recording in. So let's say now we want Cubase to determine the tempo. So let's try going to the project and do tempo detection and analyze. And now it's figured out kind of what the tempo was of the recording that you just did in retrospective record. So, and it says tempo, but I assume tempo. So, all right. So we see Michael Pierce will return with a soup recipe to share with everyone. And he's going to do a little bit of teaching and tutoring. All right. Gerald Ely broke the cardinal rule. You can't ask for a coffee in the middle of a live stream when I have like 2 more hours to go. So now I want a mocha badly. Thanks. All right. All right, so we see from Troca, it says, Greg, you saved my life last week telling me how to save a Groove Agent preset with new samples. I appreciate it very much. Now a new one. In interface color settings, which color is the focus color? All right, so let me just... see if we can find preferences. Okay, so I think that this might be, so like when I select, let's say I select a channel here, and you see that when I select it, it turns white. That is the focus color. So let's come over here. Let's say if I want to change this to kind of let's make it like an obnoxious blue. So I'll come here. So now when I select, looks like it's still so, but I think that's kind of what it is, but let me just, didn't seem like it took. All right, so let's see if I select. So I think it's this, but it doesn't seem like it's changing the color, but let's see if maybe in MIDI editor. So I think that's what it is, and it seems like it's not automatically changing that. So that might be intended to be more fixed, but I think that's what it might be. I could do some more reading up on it. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so we have a question from John Costigan. Hello, Greg. I hope all the undos are well. So we're doing great. Thanks. We're having a little birthday party for my son. He missed his birthday because we were on vacation. So now we're through all the spring holidays. So we're looking forward to that tomorrow. So Cubase 11, Windows 10, I have a group track of mixed Rhodes and piano presets that work well as a unit. Will a track preset of that group track load them as a unit? So you could save like a multi-track preset. So let's say I have a Rhodes here, and I wanted to add another instrument track. So let's make it Hallian Sonic SE. Let's load this, and let's say, okay, I just want to do like a piano. Okay, so now when I play both of these, and so we have this piano sound layered with, and I like those two together, so we could right click and click on Save Track Preset. So we'll call this Rhodes plus piano layer. All right, and we'll hit OK. So let's come over here. Let's go to your media bay, and we'll go to user presets. And then go to multi, and then we could just come right over there, drag it over, and now we could have our sounds loaded up. So you could just save it as a user preset, but you would find it under user presets. So track presets. Let's just go back. All right, so let's go to user presets, track presets, multi, and then whatever you just named, and you could just drag and drop it right out. All right, so we have Leon checking in from the UK. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see a question from Jan from CubaseIndex.com. So with the arranger track, it's easy to specify the repetitions per section, but where is it not possible to enter 0? I would like a quick way to reduce the number of darlings. So let's come back over to this project where we have some arranger track. Okay, so let's say I wanted to take this out. So obviously having a 0 would be the same as not having it. So I think if you just remove selected, that, you know, that will just take it. So let's say this one is called JJ. So if I wanted to just right click and remove selected, that would be 0. So, you know, instead of having an event in there that doesn't play, you could just remove the event from the play order. So let me know if that makes sense, Jan. All right, so see from Gareth, and sorry I didn't get a chance to respond to this before the live stream, just asking what t-shirt size I am. So you can do a XXL. So thank you. All right. But I'll send you an email as well. All right. See more discussion on coffee. Just stop. I don't have a chance to get coffee in the middle of a live stream, so. Okay, now we see discussion on soup. All right, so just going through. Thanks for all the great comments. And if you do learn something new, make sure you do hit the like button. All right, so we just see from Mark Rabin, anyone hit Control Alt Delete and see a Wave server? Do I need this BS running? So it might be probably something maybe with their licensing, so that the licensing works. So be my guess. All right, so we see Cubase Junkie just saying that the type of engine Steinberg have in Pad Shop is very noticeably sounds better than the other pads and third-party VSTs. Yep, so we have some talented guys working on the DSP programming and really interesting stuff. So. All right, just reading through comments. So Cubase Junkie says he needs more guitar loops from Lil G this time, but don't quantize it. So in all fairness, I asked him to play with really bad timing, which could be hard for good musicians. All right, so we have from Jan, is there a performance difference between a laptop versus desktop with the same processor and amount of RAM for running Cubase on Windows? Can Greg give some advice? Thanks, Jan. So I haven't really done any critical A/B tests, but I've run like pretty demanding sessions on laptops, and like usually when I was traveling all the time, my PC laptop's just an i7 with 16 gigs of RAM, and it's just kind of a workhorse laptop, and I could run 60 tracks of audio with lots of instruments on that without any problems. So, maybe the desktop would be better, but if you're doing a live performance thing, obviously the laptop, wins, for convenience factor alone significantly. So I don't think that you'll have a problem, doing any performance stuff with a modern laptop if it's capable. If you're not getting an i3 with 4 gigabytes of RAM, if you get an i7, i9, 16 or 32 gigs of RAM, you'll be in great shape. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford has made it. So it's one of the rare times where Gareth made it before Michael Teams. So it's great to have you. So I think the virtual ice cream will be start dispensing out from Texas. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped, trying to find my spot. Okay, so we see a question. Is there any way to automatically determine delay with external instruments, so software and hardware instruments are in sync. And this is kind of for those of us that have been doing MIDI for a long time with external instruments, realize that it was always, the timing, was always a bit suspect and very, it could change. So it's always problematic. And it's one of the beautiful things with virtual instruments is that they're sample accurate. What I used to do in the old days when using a lot of virtual instruments was I would record the MIDI directly onto both devices. And what you could do is actually just record a virtual instrument and record the audio and MIDI of the virtual instrument and record the audio and MIDI of an external instrument. So just even do something like just put in straight quarter notes. And then you could figure out, look at the two recordings, and you may notice that there's an offset by the time the external device processes, and then the sound is generated in the box, in the tone generator, and is passed out of the converters of the hardware. But if you record both devices simultaneously, you could see what the difference is between the virtual instrument, which will be sample accurate, and the external instrument. And then you could offset there. But realize that offset may change as more MIDI information is sent down the MIDI interface. So there's going to be lots of variables, but that's one way to kind of get like a ballpark. I need to shift these external MIDI tracks earlier on playback. So record the audio, and you may see just two samples that may look, something. Let's find some one-shot samples here quickly. So you may just kind of come over here and say, okay, this is where the two files are recorded. And let's say this is probably going to be zoomed way in. So let's say, so capture them both as audio. And then what you could do is say, okay, the timing difference between these is this long. And then you could just see the range length here. So you can say, oh, that's going to be 63 milliseconds or 63 ticks. And if we put this into seconds, you could then say, oh, this is 78 milliseconds off. And then you could set accordingly. So record both of them as audio, and you could use the reference of the virtual instrument against the audio recording of the external instrument if needed. But yeah, many composers are happy not to deal with external MIDI just because of all sorts of lovely timing inconsistencies. You see Mark Rabin is just saying he would happily trade some heat for some snow. I figured you could always add layers, but if you're hot and sweaty wearing shorts and a t-shirt, then you're just hot and sweaty often. So, okay, so we see a question. Folders can have a record button. How is that used? When I click on it, nothing happens. We could think of a folder as being a container for different types of tracks. So let's say I'm here, and I have all these tracks, let's say I'm doing a live recording, and this is when I've used it a lot. And I don't want to necessarily arm every single independent track that's within a folder. So like, I got, I was fortunate enough, like it was 18 years ago now. It doesn't seem that long. But to record like Eric Clapton's guitar, Crossroads Guitar Festival, I was one of the engineers in that. So I got to record Eric Clapton and Eric Johnson and all sorts of other amazing guitarists. But when I was doing the live recording, I had 56 tracks. And then instead of having to arm each of the tracks, I could now just arm the folder, and all the tracks within the particular folder would get armed without me having to do that individually. So that's why you could record enable and monitor enable all the tracks that are within a folder without having to do it individually. So that's really kind of the intention. So for live shows, I could just arm the folder, and every track within the folder could be record enabled or monitored just that easily with one mouse click. So no data gets recorded on a folder. Tracks that can record data, such as MIDI and audio, can be record enabled if they're within the folder, if record enabling the folder. All right, okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. When I'm recording any live sound or vocal, the audio device is set to direct monitoring. Can I use send on a record track to feed an effect to hear on the headphones as well? So generally, direct monitoring in the vast majority of audio interfaces will take the input signal and feed it directly to the output, bypassing the audio engine of the program. Now, if you have a Steinberg UR interface or an AXR or MR interface, these have built-in DSP. So when we go to our outputs, so what I'm going to do is, let's say, okay, we have our inputs here, and let's say, okay, on this, I have this input, and let's say, okay, I have mono in 1. Okay, so, the Steinberg interfaces, when we go to enable direct monitoring on the interfaces have DSP. So if I add an audio track, and let's set it to mono in 1, where we have an input defined, we can now come over here and have the UR24C. So we see this little tab, and now we can monitor with effects without having, and this is again utilizing the onboard DSP. So with the UR and AXR interfaces, we could monitor with effects and not record it, or monitor with like a morphing channel strip or different guitar amps without latency, because it's being powered by the DSP on the audio interface. But the vast majority of interfaces don't work that way, and you would have to record when you go into direct monitoring to minimize the latency. You don't have access to effects, and it may be uninspiring for the singer. So if you want to monitor with effects while in direct monitoring, that's kind of the advantage of the AXR UR interfaces. See Gareth saying nice that the Nano control was instantly supported. And he's saying, I guess it's a classic, so it's on so many composers' desks because it's small and does exactly what it should. All right, reading through comments. See that John Costigan got to see Joe Pass play through an amp with fuzz on it, so it must have been fun to see. See the Cubase Junkie wishes he was across the sea right now, and him and Jazz would be drinking some scotch and listening to Steely Dan, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Kraftwerk. So sounds like a good night. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, can you please go through the Steinberg installer components? There's a lot of stuff that I don't know if I need or not. Don't know if I just install them. Looks like almost too much. Advise, please. All right, so let's look at the download assistant. All right, so, reason why it was kind of broken down, we'd have a lot of facilities, a lot of schools that teach Cubase, and then, their students would have to download one 20 gigabyte file. And if they didn't have high speed internet, it could be problematic. And maybe it would, their data limit would cap out. Some people would download stuff on phones using their phones as, their internet connection and could only do so much at a time. So let's take a look. So let's say if we come over here to Cubase 12, so obviously you need the application, so, and then we see, recommended. So a lot of times we'll have different instruments. So Spectral Layers 1 is kind of an audio editing suite, like for doing spectral editing. We have Halion Sonic instruments, Groove Agent instruments, Retrolog, Pad Shop. And then we have content that runs like Verve that requires Halion Sonic SE. So that's an instrument set of a piano, so a felt piano. And then we have a number of different content kits. So you'll see that you'll have drum loop expansions, hip hop, analog, blockbuster, kind of kaleidoscope, more sound design, loop mash content. So all this content is available if you need it. And if you want it, it's all someone had asked earlier where to download project files. You could just do that directly here as well. So, you could probably download everything is worth getting. You paid for it. You have the license for it. I would download it all and, just have fun and explore all the content. If you wanted to take several things in, obviously the applications, I would get, if you're getting Halion Sonic SE, you might as well get the content sets for, Halion Sonic SE, the content, and have access to it because you paid for it. So I would get everything that's available to use. So. We see that Mark Rabin has told Michael Teams that everyone has chipped in and given a few train cars of ice cream for further distribution. That was nice, Mark. We're hoping it would be a surprise for Michael Teams. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, does Steinberg have something like a Behringer 80A 8200? Have looked around but haven't found any. So usually, our audio interfaces like a UR816C can function as an A to D, D to A converter. It's obviously a little more money, but most of our audio interfaces that have 8 mic pre's can function as standalone converters. Yamaha, which is Steinberg's parent company, they have a whole range of very professional I/O options that are kind of Dante based, but nothing that's the equivalent of an 80A 8200, which I think is like an 8-channel mic pre with an ADAT output. So. And generally, kind of the Yamaha stuff may be of a quality, and the components may cost more than what the Behringer unit is. And you could also check out like the Audient. I have the Audient 8-channel mic preamp, and that's a great choice as well. See, Gareth got to see Oscar Peterson perform. I got to help him with some Cubase questions once. Very nice gentleman. All right, so we have Sunnyvale or Sunny Vibez from Nigeria. So thanks for joining the live stream. All right, so we have a question from Mark Johnson. I have two Cubase versions on my MacBook Pro and would like to remove them after installing version 12 to restore room on my hard disk. Is there any instructions available to remove other versions? So it's really just like for the components, for the actual program itself, you just drag from the application folder into the trash. Unfortunately, you know, Mac OS doesn't have kind of like a standard uninstaller, but you could just drag the program file and that will just simply remove the program for you. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, another question for me. How do I color multiple channels in the mixer window? Selecting and choosing a color doesn't do it, neither does holding command. So let's see if we can do this. So let's, you know, you could obviously just kind of select them here. So if you want to select the tracks and then we could colorize on the project window. So let's see if we could do something similar. So if we select these events, I don't think that carries over. So if, you know, so if we just select all of our events here in the mixer window. So let's say if we do it on, all right, and I'll just make this a little smaller and then go to, I want those all red. We could just do it just like that. And you could probably, as long as the tracks are selected, you could probably also just say, I want to take, do a project logical editor if you wanted to do specific. So let's go to the project logical editor. So let's see, but you may have to, let's see if that will even open up if it's, yeah, so it's not an active project window, isn't active. But if you just have it all set here, but let's try another method of enabling Q-Link. And let's see if we change one of the colors of selected channels here. Yeah, so you might have to just kind of drop the mix console down a little bit and select here, and then you could use the color tool. And then as you just go back to the mix console, they would all be changed like that. Okay, just seeing a discussion about looping back from control room. I think it was directed to Jazz Dude, but let me see if I could find it earlier. I can't find the earlier reference to it. Let me just. Okay, just going through some of the questions. reading through comments. All right, so we have Gamera21 just says, welcome from Germany. Thank you a lot for these hangouts. You're welcome. So glad we could help people. Okay, so you have a question from Michael Teams. Greg, please go through hit points again for me. I need to adjust some guitar timing issues, bad fingers. All right, so if we wanted to do hit points, you know, we could go to the free warp tool. And one of the things that you need to do, you know, if you wanted to manually just kind of put like a warp marker in, so let's just make this large so it's pretty obvious. So you could, as we come over here, we could just kind of drop in our warp markers. So realize that if we have one warp marker and we say, oh, I want this event to move over. And when we kind of, you see, we have the arrows pointing to the vertical line on the left. So when we have that icon there, when we kind of hover near the warp marker, it turns white. So once that warp marker turns white, we can move it over. Now, often when we're doing this, you may want to just put in a warp marker before and a warp marker after. And that way, the events before and after will remain in place. And if you wanted to just easily turn the hit points, which are automatically detected, into warp markers, if you go to audio, and this could speed up things, and go to real-time processing, we say create warp markers from the hit points. And now this will automatically kind of place, you know, at the relevant sections. You can say, now I just want this to be a little earlier or later. And if we have snap turned on, and we can say our grid is set to, we'll say use quantize, and our quantized value say will be eighth notes. So now as I move, this can automatically snap to eighth note divisions. So let's say I want to do it to 16th notes. So it'll almost like fall into almost like a little ditch, and we could just snap accordingly. So that way, you know, if you came in, if this was a little late or early, you could just come here and say, oh, let's just move that. And that will just kind of clean up different timing problems that you could just kind of warp and say, oh, this was a little early, a little late, and I want to snap directly to the beat. Just move it like so. So give that a try. All right, so we see how much is a new CC121. So they used to sell for a little over $500 because it's actually a really high quality fader. So it's like the same fader that Yamaha would use on the DM2000 console. So it's not just like a batteries included fader. So it's a very high quality fader unit. So that's why the unit was a little more expensive than others. All right, so you just see, never thought I could actually make beats in Cubase 12. Yeah, so people have been making beats in Cubase for, 32 years or so, 33 years. So it's incredibly popular for that. All right, so we see how can I play a drum sound from my MIDI. So, if you're doing, just revert this. Let's jump back to a different project. So Cubase will have a number of different programs. So one of the, programs that you'll have is virtual instruments. And Steinberg's first company did a software drum machine with LM4 years ago. But, if you wanted to use, even something kind of like a, let's say, Groove Agent SE, which comes with Cubase. So this is kind of like just an MPC style drum machine. So if we want to come here, I'm just going to fix this panning. Somehow my panning got saved one time. All right, so let's say I wanted to come here and just put in, so this way I could play this particular, just using a MIDI keyboard. And if I wanted to hit Alt or Option plus K, we could use an on-screen keyboard. So if you wanted to, and if you wanted to program beats quickly, there's a number of different ways of doing that, but an easy one is to use the MIDI insert called Beat Designer. So let's just activate Beat Designer here. So let's say if I would just want to do a brand new beat, I could just kind of come. And if I just wanted to kind of put in, different sounds, I could just say, okay, let's put in a little hi-hat here. Change the velocity, put a flam. You wanted to find some other and if you wanted to even come here and just change the velocities. So it's really easy making beats inside of Cubase, as you can see. So just a super great program, but you could just, take any MIDI and just play directly there. Or if you wanted to take sounds, there's also sampler tracks. If you want to play drums from MIDI, we could drag it to the sampler track and now be able to kind of play your sample loops just accordingly. You see that Gareth doesn't travel if it's not by private jet, so I got to do a private jet once with a rock star, so that didn't suck. All right, so we see Mitch Michelle checking in from Michigan. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see, hello, in Contact, I can use a script to make a small pitch randomization over time that I use on, for instance, a snare track on a hip-hop beat. Can I do something similar in a sampler track? So yeah, you could do, there's lots of different ways of doing it, but let's say if we have, you know, even if we wanted to, let's say I wanted to play that pattern here. So let's say if I wanted to take this snare, you know, let's say I have, you know, we could choose to randomize slightly, you know, different controls. So let's come over here, and if we're looking at the particular instrument, you know, we could just come over here and just, so let's say I want it, so let's say if I want to take the, I want to take this snare. All right, let me just solo this. All right, so we could just come over here and go to the pitch tab. And, you know, if you wanted to just have kind of random pitch, we could just adjust kind of the envelope here some more. Let me make sure I'm on the right. So it's, so now as we play, and let's say we want, so let's say the hi-hats, I just want to have my envelope out. So as we listen to our snare, so you could just do that. So there's a number of different ways of being able to do that. So that's probably the easiest way. You see that Gerald and Jeff Sabelski are both coffee junkies. So you see Mark Rabin is also helpless to the great and mighty Mocha. So there's a guy in Nashville I know who's like one of the most amazing coffee artists in the world. Like, where, you know, presidents will go to Nashville to get coffee from this guy, and he made me this mocha that was just so unbelievably good. So all right, reading through comments. Yes, during pandemic, I got a Keurig machine with a frother, so I could have a good mocha at home without having to go to Starbucks. Okay, so we see for Neil Conway, question on PC, Cubase 1202 draws nicely and then drops to an ugly, like 4-bit pixelated thing. I move the window and it draws nicely again. Ideas. Rest of apps are normal. So try, if you go on, just make sure, I think you're on PC. So, you know, sometimes it could be a little draining depending on your video cards. It really kind of sounds like a video card issue. So see if you go to preferences, and it's not on Mac, but if you go to general on a Windows platform, if you see enable high DPI, so try if you disable that or enable that and see if that makes a difference. Probably disable it and see if that makes a difference. And it could just be that the graphics display card, you know, especially if it's an NVIDIA, is not keeping up. Or maybe you try I think it's a studio drivers versus like a gaming mode. You could try that. Yeah, so I see from Choka, the big mystery what the focus color is. I'll see if I can do some more research on it over the weekend. If send me an email, and then maybe I can have an answer by Tuesday's live stream. We see Gareth is sharing it's the job of the old to bore the young. At least that's his excuse. Yeah, I think that's the job of parents. So. All right, so we see John Costigan just saying, thanks so much, Greg. His new instrument layer of the piano and the Rhodes is saved. All right, so we see a question from Choka. Can I set, so monitoring goes to a different route than the main mix? And thank you so much. So what some people will do is, you know, so if just make sure, so you could have the main mix, you know, go to, you know, so let's say, yeah, so probably the easiest way is just to have, so let's say if we're in our mix console here, let me just do it with a different function here. So let's say, go to this project. Okay, so right now everything is going into my control room. Okay, and let's say if, you know, you wanted all of your different components here. So what some people will do is kind of take all of their tracks of audio and add a group channel, like almost like a pre-master bus. So I'm going to add a group channel to the selected channels. We'll make it stereo. Okay. So now everything is going through this group. And if I wanted to now route this group to other outputs, other destinations, to other Q sends, we could just do this. So let's say, so if you have it kind of set, you know, once you're at the master output, you know, there's nowhere left to, you know, to route it. You could come over here and, you know, route it to a different output. Some people, if you wanted to, you know, have different, if it's for switching different monitors, you could use the control room to do this. So we could have, like, you know, if I want to switch between my Yamaha HS7s to JBLs to Genelecs, I can now just come over here and route kind of the main mix to different speakers if you wanted to do that. But you could also route, if you send everything to like a pre-master group, and then you could do a lot of flexible routing there to other different destinations. So. See Jazz Dude saying, my son Ryan will learn how to make a coffee and brings his dad a second cup after 2 hours. He likes the mocha too, especially with the frothy milk. So. All right, so we have Peter checking in from South Africa. Thanks for joining us. welcome to the live stream. Okay, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so I think I'm in the neighborhood where I was, sorry. Lots of questions in my future here. All right, so we see Mitch Michelle is just saying the Wave server can be disabled either in MS config on PC or by using the Revo uninstall tools, and Wave's plugins run fine without it running. So thanks for sharing your insights, Mitch. All right, so we see any which way we can get sends on faders. So there currently isn't a way to flip the sends down to do faders. But I've passed it on in the past, and I'll be for the NAMM show. I'll be getting together with some of the Cubase product planning people, so I'll kind of reiterate it. So there isn't a way to flip the sends down like we can on a lot of live consoles. All right, and we see anyway we can get pre-gain on faders, so it's kind of the same situation. So it isn't there, and I think kind of pre-gain on faders might be a little more dangerous, because you could send an extra 48 dB of gain pretty quickly, and that people would probably sue us for breaking their speakers and stuff like that. All right, so we have a question. Does your Cubase 12 struggle to close when you've had a big project open? I have to force quit most of the time. So usually that is kind of the result of maybe a plugin that's not releasing from memory. So it's probably going to be down to one plugin that's just trying to hold on to memory and doesn't let go. So, I could have huge projects open and, generally run, mostly Steinberg plugins, but don't really have an issue with that. So it's going to be probably one plugin. It's going to be a culprit that doesn't want to let go of your computer's memory. Some people, I think, will close the project first and then close Cubase. And that could, for some reason, kind of triggers it a little differently. All right, so we see how can we sync our track panning with sends panning? Okay, so let's come over here. So I think it's a preference, and this kind of moves periodically. Okay, so there's this activate link panners for new tracks. So I think that might be it. Let me just. So I think by default, when you go to your sends, so let's say if we come here. let's come here. Let's get to the panning. So I think this is one of those little settings that just changed locations. Let me see if I'm having a brain cramp on it. Yeah, so once you do that, then you can see that they'll be linked after the send is added. So as you do that, so again, it's going to be kind of tied to this preference to activate link panners to new tracks. As you add new tracks after adding that, then it'll be linked for you. See, comment from Cubase Junkie. Greg does the question I ask in 1 minute. I struggle trying to do it for 2 hours. So glad I could help. See, Cubase Junkie says, I know I'm not the only one who I knew Cubase like the back of my hand, but still Greg knows way more. So I'm sure there's people who know way more than I do. So. All right, so we see, Greg, please show how to avoid processing overload audio. So, one of the things that, the first thing to do, depending on your audio system is, if you go to your audio interface, if you're running into overload, is try to increase the buffer size. So the smaller the buffer is more responsive, like faster for mix editing when you play instruments in. But if you're not mixing, if you're just mixing at that point where you're adding lots of effects, raise the buffer size, and that gives you a lot more headroom to work with. And sometimes you realize that if you have one audio track, that audio track is how it kind of utilizes CPU is that one audio track can take one CPU core. This audio track can do its processing on another CPU core, etc. And that's just how DAWs work and how they utilize multiple processors. So if you have 16 plugins on one track that are really heavy and no plugins on anything else, that could make your computer kind of come to a crawl, because the audio performance, which is going to be different than CPU performance, could be affected by how the plugins are loaded across your different tracks. So I know some people, will take a reverb and run it as an insert on every track. You don't have to do that. You could probably use a send and take the same reverb and apply it to multiple channels instead of running 8 of the same reverbs. So those are some things you could do to avoid processing overloads, and you could always, render tracks, freeze them, etc. So it's just playing back an audio file and not doing real-time processing. All right. Okay, so I see Troca's email, so I'll look into it. All right. See Neil Conway saying, I'm looking to get the UR24C for that onboard DSP coming from UA Apollo and like the compressor in real time. So yeah, it's nice to be able to, record with a compressor or just monitor with it as well. See Gareth just talking about his nano control. He downgraded to it and he doesn't miss his old motorized fader setup. So see Jeff Sabelski saying, I monopolized the market on doing long live streams, answering lots of questions. So and Jeff Sabelski got to see Earth, Wind, and Fire in the 70s in the San Francisco Bay Area. That would probably be good. According to Neil Conway, I do the best non-sell sale. So as long as people keep buying Cubase, it's great. We're happy. All right, so we see James Bond about deleting multiple time warping at once. So we did cover that right at the beginning of the live stream. So if it's the warp markers, there really isn't. It's kind of one by one. But if you go to the audio menu and under real-time processing, you could choose to. Or within, if you've done a lot of warping on the tracks, again, just go to the sample editor here, and we could choose under free warp. So let's say if we've done a number of warping here. So if we have warp markers, and we've done a number of warp edits, then at that point you could choose within the sample editor to reset. So you could do it like that, but there's no way, as we mentioned, to erase like 4 warp markers. You can kind of take them all away, but we covered that right at the very beginning. All right, so Neil Conway, just in referencing the UR24C, I think from earlier, is a little concerned about UA and its own ecosystem. So I think we see where, closed ecosystems lead. It's usually not a good place for customers. So, all right, so looking forward to getting a T-shirt from Gareth. So thanks for that. Let me know if you need my address. I'm not sure if you have my shipping address. So. All right, we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. All right, okay, so I guess it's not a question. All right, so. All right, we see Gerald Ely just saying, warp markers, I need that tip. That's good. All right, so we see from Neil Conway just saying, could I use that to adjust a one strum that I decided to miss? So yeah, it's really nice for different rhythmic corrections like that, you know. Right, so I see Nick is claiming I'm trying to steal Pablo's job, so I have too much respect for Pablo as a player. We're a tight rhythm section, so. All right, so we see from Gareth, just for people who might not know, could you show sound editing, importing, and exporting mixer and effect settings that are all inside a Groove Agent SE? Okay, so we'll go ahead and show that. Let's do a new project where it's a little more obvious. And we could do this with the acoustic agent kits. All right, so let's say we have our mixer set up here. And let's say at this point we have these going to, so let's say we have our kit mixer, and the mixer itself, we could have like different aux sends. So as we play, we can just kind of come over here. So let's say as we're, so let's say, you know, if I wanted to add more reverb to the snare, you know, we could come over and, you know, each one of the different effects, I could say, okay, I want the snare louder. And if I wanted to more reverb, but each kit, we could also have its own EQ, compression, tape saturation. So if I wanted more drive. And let's say if I go to the snare, you know, I could go to my envelope shaper, have more gain, maybe add more length. And let's come over here to the compressor on the snare. Let's activate this. So let's say we kind of got all these different aspects set up, but we go to our mix console and everything is going out of basically one stereo fader. So we have our own internal mixer, but maybe I want to expand it more into the Cubase mixer, so everything's coming out stereo. So we could right click and export mixer and effects to Cubase. And then at that point, all the different settings have now been exported. So when we go to our snares channel, I can come just right over here and we go to our snares channel, and then we can see the channel strip that's been set up in the order. So all the settings from the Groove Agent mixer have now just carried over directly into our Cubase mixer. So if you've done like a lot of settings and you say, oh, I just really want to run a different third-party plugin on this, you could just, again, from Groove Agent itself, right-click, and export the mixer and effects directly to Cubase. So it's a great integration level. All right, so we have Samson Strike joining from Austria. Thanks for joining us. Okay. All right. So we see from Jan about the arranger track questions. Let me just jump back to that. All right. So it says, no, to delete event does not work for me to try to reduce the number of darlings because it is difficult to remember where to put back a deleted. But being able to enter 0 repetition in the arranger track makes it much easier to effectively try out and hopefully reduce the number of darling in a song. So let's say if we have an arranger track here, one of the things that you could do that's pretty easy is you just come here and you could duplicate the chain. So you could, keep one here and let's say, okay, I wanted to do a variation. Instead of having to set it to 0, but just remove the selected, but you could have, multiple chains here. So you could always just choose to duplicate the chain. And, maybe that's kind of a temporary workaround. But it could be weird having an event that you see here and have 0 repetitions of it. So there could be kind of a weird software logic to it. It's like, why have notes that don't play or something like that, but I'll pass it along, there hasn't been maybe there'll be some additions and enhancements to the arranger track, but I'll pass that along. But maybe if you wanted to see the original as a reference, that you could just come here and again, just duplicate the chain. So that might be the best kind of short-term solution for you. All right. So according to Gareth, I'll be playing in Ibiza this summer. So. And we're going to have a Cubase meetup party in Ibiza this summer with my beats from live streams. All right, so we see Stephen Banta here in the room. Love Cubase 12. Thank you for the great tutorials. So I'm glad they're helpful for people. And make sure people can get what they paid for and learn all the great features. So Gareth is saying Simon Phillips' kick sound is the bomb. So his snare is pretty awesome too. So, and Simon's such a wonderful, humble person. So just really enjoyed spending time with him and working with him a bit and helping him on some questions. All right, you see Michael Pierce has made it back. Let's see how we're doing on time. So we're doing pretty well. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, so we have Joran checking in from Belgium. Thanks for joining us. All right, see Gareth has to step away, so have a great weekend. All right, so we have Abhishek, Kate checking in from India. Thanks for joining, being part of the community today. Yeah, and we will be, see some discussion of the NAMM show. So we will be in the Yamaha booth. So if anyone is at the NAMM show, so I think June 3rd through the 5th. So if anyone comes out for a show, please stop by, say hi. Okay, so we see, says, question, I created an audio track, name it test 1, record, then rename my track to test 2, but the recorded audio file still has a tag of test 1. Is there a setting so they auto sync names? So, you know, the audio, you know, the audio file name will be based on what the name of the track was when you first started. So if you wanted to just come here, so we'll just create empty. Okay, so we'll add an audio track here. We'll call it audio test 1. Okay, so now we record. All right, so we see it's going to be called audio instead of audio. All right, so, but if I just change this name to 2, you know, that audio file is still changing the name because you don't necessarily want the track name to change the audio file. But if you go to the file name here, you can just change it. So, so now I think when we go to our pool window that we could see that just by typing the name in here. So, you know, there'd be a lot of repercussions, like if you wanted to just change the track name to name the audio file, because this is kind of what's being used under the hood for file management and everything like that. So every time that you would change, you know, it would be a bad thing for it to change the audio file names based on the tracks after the file has been recorded. But if you needed to do it, just come over here to the file menu and you could just rename it there if needed. Okay. You see Jazz Dude's done some moderation. Thank you. Okay, so we see question. In a live setting, I'd like not to have to remix everything to a stereo file for playback in arranger mode. Can you pull songs you want and then activate each in turn? Can that be automated? So what a lot of people will do is, let's say, when utilizing the arranger track, I saw a tutorial from Ryan Benyo on this that he shared with me yesterday. So let's say, this is song 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's say these are our sets. So let's add an arranger track. Okay, so now I'm just going to come here. And we'll set our arranger events. I'm going to hit P and then double click on the arranger track between the left and right locators. So hit P, sets the left and right locators around the event. All right, so we double clicked these. So, if you have kind of mapped everything over and then, laid them out like this, and then when you're playing live, you could just say one night, okay, I want this. So people will put it into like a master project that you can navigate either via markers, cycle markers, or arranger events. And then let's say this will be, oftentimes I see acts will have, alternate between 2 or 3 different sets. So we could have all of the content in one particular project, and then you could just say, okay, I wanted to duplicate this chain, but I wanted it to start with C instead of A, and I wanted, B to be ahead. And now we could just come here and we could save this particular, we'll rename this as, set 2. And we could have this, we'll rename to set 1. And you could do just like different variations and be able to navigate. So most people will put it all into kind of one project, and then you could at that point, and you could do it quite easily just by doing the, import tracks from project, and put it at different timelines, and that way you could have like all the tempo information and all the effects and everything just kind of automatically carried over. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. Thank you, Jazz Dude, for your dedicated moderation. All right, so we see a question, how to put 2 guitars to the same effects track. Okay. Okay, so let's say in this project I have 2 guitars and I want to send them to, let's say, the same reverb. All right, so one of the easy ways is just to come over here and select both tracks. Right click and say add effects channel track to selected tracks. So let's say I want to put a reverence. So now we do this, and both tracks, when we go to our sends, so we'll come here, open up the sends, and these will be now routed directly to reverence. So, and if I just had, let's say I added another effects channel, like a delay, and now I wanted the delay for each of these, I could just go to the sends and say, okay, now I want it to go out to my mono delay, and let's activate the send and turn it on. Let's come over here, and again, we could activate the mono delay, turn it on, and now we could just add effects manually, or we could select both of the tracks and right click and add an effects channel to the selected tracks. All right, so we see a question. Is it possible in the future Cubase will make a real-time frequency change while editing any track visually? Mean when you edit anything, you can see it, not need to export it? Okay. So, and this is from Loading Soon. So I'm not sure if I understand if it's like when you say frequency change while editing any track. So let's say if I'm here, all right, and now I have all my delays. So I'm not sure if you wanted to change the pitch of the particular audio file or not. Let me just, so when you say frequency change while editing any track visually, so if it's something like, okay, I want to add a transpose track. So this would be like the frequency. So if I come here, let's say, okay, let's go up 2. And we'll go back to the root key, starting right here. So, and it says when editing any track visually, I mean, when you edit anything, you can see it, not need to export it. So I think I'm misunderstanding, but if you want to re-ask the question in maybe another way, or if maybe someone else, sorry if I'm being dense about understanding, but maybe if someone else has an indication that they could share, that'd be great. All right, so we see Michael Finlayson, Finsnake, trying to get into the Cubase Nation Discord, so maybe Jazz Dude will be able to help him. All right. All right, great to see Sable Winters on the live stream. Thanks for joining. All right, and we have Anas Patel, first time here. So thanks for joining the live stream today. See, Michael Pierce is saying, NAMM runs right up to my birthday, but on the wrong continent. So, yeah, so I think it's going to be a smaller show this year. So maybe next year it'll be kind of back to the normal sense of what NAMM was. All right, so Anas Patel asked, is it just me or Cubase does not load Groove Agent or other instruments for you all too? So, yeah, it obviously is loading up instruments. So if you update it from an earlier version, there's probably new versions of instruments that are available. So you could check that and see, and also within the Steinberg Download Manager, the Steinberg Download Assistant rather, within that program that you have it installed, but make sure that when you go to like add an instrument track, so if you're coming from earlier versions, there's probably updates to particular instruments, and if they haven't been updated, and let's say you don't have a USB-E licenser, that they may not be under the instruments that come with Cubase, like such as Groove Agent SE will, if you don't have the new version installed, will still require the USB-E licenser. But if you have the version that comes with Cubase 12, that you can run it on the new licensing system. So check that. So Thermonuclear War just says, when I see out of box mixing, I cry. So we have a question. Greg, do you know how many tracks you can record live with Cubase 3? I know you could do 24. It might be the latest versions, might be unlimited, but I could check just to make sure. But I think if you look on the App Store, that you could see, but I think it might be just limited to the hardware. But I know, like, I've done it. I think I did it. If I remember right, we did a 24 track recording with the UR824 on Cubase a while ago. So see, Jeff Sabelski says, I was at the Anaheim NAMM show years ago. I had a booth with my oboe reeds. A national music distributor wanted them, but there were complications with my brother-in-law who thought he was in charge. So yeah, NAMM shows can do that. You get to learn a lot about people at NAMM shows. So. All right, we see that Michael Finlayson is now in to the Cubase Nation Discord. It's great news. So we see Jeff Sabelski just saying, NAMM is so very cool. Hope it comes to California again. So yeah, the summer show this year, because it was postponed from January in June, will be in back at Anaheim, its usual winter spot. All right. So just kind of further questions about the, is it possible in the future Cubase will make a real-time frequency change while editing any track visually? I mean, when you edit anything, you can see it and not need to export it. So, if you do a lot of offline processing, so let's say if I take, this particular track, so let's look at like this track here, like our Tom track, and I wanted to just do processing on it. So if we hit F7 and we come over here, so let's say we just hit the right F7 button this time. So let's say if I wanted to do, processing, so I could just do offline processing directly here. So let's say I wanted to add like a delay plugin on this. So let's say I want to add a mono delay of eighth notes that, as we've processed this, we can now just, process all of this without having to export. So, let's say even if we just select particular regions here, and okay, I wanted to invert the phase, I wanted to reverse that audio, I wanted to run it through a reverb, any of these settings we could just do here without without having to export. So if you wanted to apply processing, if that's what you mean, or, even if you wanted to do multiple, render in place, multiple processing, or render or do freezing on multiple tracks without having to export, you could do that. But I think I still might be misunderstanding. I'm not sure what the real-time frequency change means, but, but if you needed to process the audio, you could definitely do that without having to utilize export. See, Michael Pierce wants to work for Sound on Sound magazine, so you can go to the NAMM show. So, Right, reading through some more. All right, so we see a question. What is the fundamental reason, the difference between the instrument track and VSTI rack? So originally, like when VST instruments, were released, it was very much of the analogy to match like the paradigm of a hardware synth module, so that we would have a rack of software instruments instead of a rack of hardware, and we would send MIDI information to it. So there was no real difference in how you created a MIDI that was sent to an external instrument like a Montage or ModiX, or MIDI that was being routed directly to a software instrument. But then we wanted to simplify the process so that people could just load an instrument and it would load the audio channel and you could have effects and inserts. So then came instrument tracks to simplify it for people that never had the experience of routing MIDI to external devices and that paradigm and that concept. So over time, more people, have not, there's a lot of people now who just want to work entirely with virtual instruments, which makes sense. It's a better workflow. It's better timing. So now we have kind of instrument tracks. But we can't necessarily, for all of the previous generations of projects and workflows, we can't necessarily cut off particular feature sets that people are very, have a very ingrained workflow in utilizing. So that's why there's kind of both. So some of the limitations of instrument tracks, again, it was supposed to be fast, easy. So originally they didn't do multiple outputs. That's been added. And there wasn't a way to do multi-timbral. So it's just one MIDI channel, one stereo out. So now that people want the flexibility and ease of consolidating the automation for volume, not to be MIDI CC, but to be automation within the project of an instrument track, there's now been added those flexibilities as well. So we need to kind of maintain the, previous paradigms and workflows and introduce new ones without cutting either off. So that's why there's kind of those two. All right. Okay, so I see from Loading Soon says, I just asked about when using any plugin, is it possible to see your edits usually visually on a track, like the shape of the frequency in a project? So yeah, so when you do the direct offline processing, so should be able to visually see that in a waveform. All right, so we see Graham Witcher from Royal Booton Wasset. See how we're doing on time. Okay, we're doing okay. All right, so you see Michael Pierce has take off. Thanks for joining us. All right, so see we're at 133 likes. That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we see, yes, Greg, that was correct, but you like it if the offline process, but when you use the normal insert, it changes while putting any plugin you start editing. So one of the cool things with the direct offline processing is, let's say I wanted to take this event here and I have an insert plugin on that particular track. So let's say, okay, I want to do the VST bass amp, that we could come right over here. So let's say I have the VST bass amp and got like the bass completely dimed here and to say no treble or mid. I could just take that particular insert and drag it to the process, and that would just process the file. And I could do that for multiple inserts as well. So if you wanted to just drag from the inserts right into the direct offline processing, that's another available option. All right, so I know we think we're at the end of the questions, but let's go ahead and go to some of the questions that were mailed in. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Didn't have too many mailed in this week. So we had this from Mitch Michelle, and we discussed this over email, but one of the things was a question last week about how to do real-time rendering for particular plugins in WaveLab. So I figured out how to do it, so I wanted to share it with other people. So we'll come over here. Okay, so we'll just get this file open here. All right, so let's say we're just doing a little bit of so the question was about kind of doing like a real-time export. So when we go to the render, you'll see when we come here to start, and on the Windows platform, you need to right click. But when we come right over here, we could say start rendering in real time. And this way, if we have like plugins on it, at this point, we could just do a real time rendering as opposed to offline. So some plugins will work better real time versus offline. So at this point, you could just choose to start rendering it in real time. Also, I think there's a question from Soren from a couple weeks ago about what the colors were when utilizing the loudness display here. And I thought that they might be frequencies, but what they are is they'll kind of show, one will be kind of the long-term loudness, the short-term loudness, the immediate loudness. So these colors will represent kind of different scales that we might see on our loudness meter. So where we could, see our integrated loudness, our short-term loudness. So those are kind of what each of those particular frequencies is kind of utilizing there. All right, and we had a question. All right, so we'll jump back to Cubase. Just saying, I used the comp tool to create a comp vocal track. Then I duplicated the track version for safety and deleted the overlaps on the second version to work on it more easily. I then used Very Audio to manually pitch correct this second track version. It all sounded great at that point. Then I duplicated the track version again to clean up some noise using spectral layers. On the third track version, at that point, every single one of my pitch edits started sounding awful. Bad artifacts sounding like clipping. Even the second track version before spectral layers sounds terrible. I have to start over. Do you have any advice? So if I was doing, like a lot of processing and doing, very audio spectral layers, editing, and, doing all sorts of comping. What I would do is just each step of the way, like after you do, let's say, you're tuning. So I would, during each step of the process, I would do a new track version, which makes sense. So let me just undo that. So say we will duplicate this version, and on this version, I will do tuning, and then I would duplicate that version again and, do a render in place to actually write the audio file. Because, if you're kind of doing 3 different processes at once, because doing spectral editing, that can affect the real-time playback of your tuning, because those frequencies that you're taking out for noise could also be used to determine the sibilances in the vocal. So as you do a particular edit, do a new track version and then render that particular file. And then it's actually going to not be, when you do spectral editing in spectral layers, it's going to have less of an impact if the audio files have already been rendered with the pitch changes. And if you just kind of do a new track version and label them, you could quickly go back and forth if you needed to change the order of that particular processing. So that's what I would recommend. All right, so let me just jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. All right, so I think I'm at the end of the chat questions. I'll give it another minute. Otherwise, we could end just a little bit early. We'll just wait. All right, so we see from the Studio International, it says update Cubase is 3, unlimited audio tracks, 24 input and output tracks. I was right. So glad I remembered that one. All right. There's usually a little bit of a delay from when I'm talking to when you guys all hear it. So I'll just wait a moment and we'll see if there's any other questions that pop in. We want everyone to have a wonderful weekend, and everyone please stay safe and healthy. We will be doing our 2 live streams next week. The week after that, I will be out at the NAMM show, so I won't be doing live streams from the NAMM show. But we'll have that week off, but then we'll be back on our regular schedule probably until 4th of July. I may have some time off around then as well. So. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, would you suggest noise reduction from spectral layers before multi-processing? So I would probably do render the very audio stuff before doing noise reduction. So that's some of the things that's probably what I would do, because those frequencies could be really important for the detection of the segment detection. All right, so Nick is passing on a coffee for my time stamping. I'll have to do. All right, so Jazz Dude saying 140 likes. So thanks again, Greg deserves it. It was a great hangout again. So thank you for your passionate moderation and all your help you do, Jazz Dude. I appreciate it. All right. Okay, so see, yeah, Michael, if you wanted to get that track uploaded, I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it. All right. Okay, so it looks like we are just about wrapped up. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up, and wish everyone a wonderful weekend. And again, everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone back on Tuesday. Thank you very much.